Hey everybody. I wanted to do this little discussion and show and tell and also explain video if I dare on what to me is such an interesting Cat Stevens album, Numbers. I think it kind of flew under the radar. I don't think it did all that well commercially. I think the album was considered a flop, at least by the record companies, and that's one reason went more in a much more commercial direction on Is It So? But I really like this album, and as I've gotten older, I've started to see the significance of what he was trying to do. So I'm going to show you the album itself, and a couple things. I have this is my old 1975 copy I got of Cat Stevens Numbers. But one problem is I had lost a booklet over the years, so just recently I ordered a vinyl copy of the album with the booklet, and it's kind of like the Who Quadrophenia. It comes with a booklet, so I'm going to show you that booklet a little bit, and then I'm also going to show you this. I bought this at Burke's Music in Wheaton, Illinois in 1976, and I still have it. It's an old piano, vocal, guitar book, and this book is really nice. I just was thinking you used to get all these nice glossy photos. It's a pretty well bound book. I mean, it's held up over the years. So they dumped some money into this album, and I don't think it did all that well. There's Cat Stevens, his Ben Applegas. Ben Applegas was a touch of Cheech and Chong there, if I may read into it. But it's really nice. You get some nice glossy shots. And there's Ben Applegas. Look, that's that kind of 70s look. This looks kind of like it's a cross between the sort of trippy. It looks like could be a midnight movie. It's some, showing a lot with Pink Floyd in a double feature, or it could be like H.R. Puffin stuff, 70s kids Saturday morning TV show. You're not quite sure. There's Ben Applegas, which is sort of a Cheech and Chong type reference there. But this is such an interesting album, and this little write-up here on before you get into the actual music of the album, there's Whistle Star, that outstanding first. But before you get into the actual music of the piano, vocal, guitar book, you have this little write-up, and I would imagine this has been out of print a long time. But this is one of the best little write-ups on Cat Stevens Numbers I've ever seen. And it really kind of explains the background of the album, I think, better than like the Wikipedia entry, certainly. Because I thought this, and it's kind of I don't know if it's that rare, but it's not on the album itself. It's in this piano, vocal, guitar book. So I just kind of wanted to walk you through the album a little bit. It's not a review of the album itself, but it's sort of the concept of the album. One of the interesting things is I think the album is based on the principle that this Hestia Lovejoy explained to Cat Stevens. Let's look at this. This really nice little write-up from the piano, vocal, guitar book all those years ago. How come things seem to happen in threes? Is it just sheer coincidence or merely the normal cycle of happenings? But that numbers have always figured into Cat's life. As a child, there was the lucky number 3 as a recording artist. When he first started writing, all verses came in threes. The number created a unified form, the beginning, the middle, and the end. Right? By the way, look at that nice picture of Cat Stevens. And one thing I noticed there, if you forgive the gratuitous aside, he's wearing a cross. And you might have noticed that discussion of Cat Stevens' conversion to Islam from a fan's perspective that I talked about. I said, he made his conversion. I think we all should respect that. But he did have a good background. His mother was a Calvinist. His father was Greek Orthodox, and there he's wearing a cross. So just a little notice there. But this Hestia Lovejoy, let's see if I can keep all this organized. So it says here, it was during Cat's 1974 Australian tour that the doctrines of Pythagoras were revealed to him by a tall lady named Hestia Lovejoy. In return, he dedicated his album Numbers to her and proceeded to complete his musical concept. So Hestia Lovejoy, now I Googled her and I couldn't find much about her, but sure enough, if you look at the back of Numbers, there it is, to Hestia Lovejoy. And according to, I saw a little video, I don't think it was 60 seconds long, but Cat Stevens was explaining that one of the things that Hestia Lovejoy explained to him was that 1 is the highest number because 1 is unity. So everything always boils down to 1. I guess that would be one reality, one essence. And maybe in terms of religion, that would be there's one God. So it's a monotheistic idea in a way. But 1 is the highest number. Everything distills down to 1. You know, I have 2 guitars here, but they're in one room. And this one, you know, there's how many rooms in the house, but it's one house. Everything always distills down to 1 until you have one reality. And maybe I'm a child of the 70s, but that's kind of an interesting concept. But anyway, let's finish reading this really quickly. I've got too many things I'm trying to sort through here. So this Hestia Lovejoy explained the concept of, and I think the 1 was one of the things she explained. From the remote teachings of Pythagoras, Cat began to develop an idea about using numbers as symbols or manifestations of the laws of life as they happen in the universe. In November 1975, the idea began shaping into a spiritual musical set on the planet Polygore. So this would be the planet Polygore. Let's see if I can get this, get the numbers booklet out here. I don't know if I'm doing this right. There's the planet Polygore generating all these numbers. They've got a number generating machine, numbers 1 through 9, going from the planet. So he's got this planet Polygore. Let's see here. In the story, there's a castle with the number machine, the machine existing to fulfill the sole purpose of the planet, to disperse numbers to the rest of the universe. So this planet called Polygore, they have a machine that generates numbers. I looked at this booklet. Farther away from our Earth than it is possible to imagine, there was a galaxy, and almost in the center of the galaxy was the little planet of Polygore. Polygore existed to give numbers to the universe. Number 1, number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Each day, millions and billions and zillions of numbers were distributed to every world that needed them. So that's really interesting. So number 1 is the highest of those numbers. It's the opposite of how we think, really, which is interesting. You know, everything boils down to 1. So such an interesting concept. Let's just finish this because this is such an interesting little write-up. Only 10 inhabitants exist on Polygore. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0. 0, known as Jezero, turns out to be a prophet who comes from nowhere as a slave and eventually confuses everybody with his simple truth. Now that's sort of an interesting, in the booklet, they say that Jezero shows up on the planet. There's the planet. The palace of Polygore was built on the pinnacle of a high mountain. It pierced the clouds and was always full of light. What a great drawing, huh? I mean, Cat Stevens could have been like a children's illustrator. That's really nice. Not sunlight. For in that far corner of the cosmos, there was no sun like ours, but a softer, warmer light from a cluster of burning stars. The numbers were made on a huge machine deep in the cellars of the castle. Nobody knew how long the palace had stood. Nobody indeed knew who had built it. There were no dates carved in the stone, and no records had ever been kept. Only 9 people lived in the palace. The first polygon was called Monad. And so there's Monad, and he's the emperor. And he's the highest. So Monad was the emperor, bossy and bad-tempered. He always talked loudly. But he's the highest number. Now, what's interesting is 0, just 0, is not really there in the story. So I think the premise, it's kind of a fuzzy, like I said, it was never really fleshed out because that would have required a movie or a bigger book or something. But it does kind of imply that the planet started out with 1 through 9 and then 0 was added. So 0 is the absence of value, and that was like freedom and liberation. Only 10 inhabitants exist on Polygor: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0, known as Jezero, which this is not written all that clearly. It means Jezero sort of shows up late to the game, but he represents 0, the absence of value. Just kind of an interesting mathematical concept too. 0 is the absence of value, but it also try going to your bank and taking a $10 check, add a few zeros to it, and then tell the teller, well, it's the absence of value. So turns out to be a prophet who comes from nowhere as a slave and eventually confuses everybody with this simple truth. So Jezero kind of was whimsical. It took Cat 3 months in Brazil to complete writing Numbers. He then set out to find writers for the story. He found them in 2 English humorists named Chris Bryant and Alan Scott. So these 2 guys, Chris Bryant and Alan Scott, were going to write a story, apparently. The combination proved to be synergetic, for when they joined Cat in Canada for the recording of the album, they quickly outlined the work of the story. So he was trying to make this into a big project, it sounds like, and it sounds like they pretty much got an album out of it in this little booklet. So too bad. It's another one of those what if, what is it? Of all the words of mice and men, the saddest are, it might have been. Most of the work was completed before Cat flew in Paris in June 1975 to begin his drawing. As though drawing in Paris weren't enough inspiration, Cat drew from Disney for a feeling of detail and reality. He borrowed from Disney's use of shadows to lend a quality of mystery, often detailing from the interiors of a design before ever approaching the exterior. By the way, that is a sentence fragment, I would say. Often detailing from the interiors of a design before ever approaching the exterior scenario. Anyway, by July, Cat was ready to return to the States with 50 illustrations in hand for the release of his new album. So this booklet, I guess, is what was left of 50 illustrations for would have been like a book. This kind of reminds me of like Jonathan Livingston Seagull, or which was a book that became a album by Neil Diamond and then a movie. And I don't know. I feel like in that case, the book was so popular, and I don't know if it ever translated that well to the movie or the music. But anyway, this might be kind of the opposite. But anyway, he made this book, and there were 50 drawings. So I wonder whatever happened, because I don't think we have all 50. One wonders whether the album Numbers and the book, both filled with magic, fantasy, and spirit, are the finale for this phase in Cat's creation. So this is kind of publicity language for basically implying it's incomplete. The concept, to be young, the concept was grandiose, but you know what? Out of that, if you aim for nothing, hit it every time. We did get a great album and this little booklet full of some great original art. As Numbers seemed to go especially, so he did 2 of the 3. He did the album and the little book, but it seemed like it maybe should be a movie. But as Numbers seemed to go, especially for Cat Stevens, we could probably expect a 3rd. Things seem to be happening in 3s, so pretty interesting. Let's just look at this booklet really quickly. I don't want to go on too long, so I'll get this focused here. So there's Monad, the bossy emperor. That's 1, the highest number. There's Doopy. Doopy was wise, quiet, and loyal. He was so devoted that each night he washed Monad's feet. So I guess Doopy, see, right away, 1 is the highest number. 2 is in the service of 1. Treslar was the 3rd. Treslar was the youngest and most cheerful Polygon. He loved adventures. So, getting like childlike. Look at that nice little Cat Stevens drawing. There's Cubus. I guess the cube, for some reason, the 4 sides seems orderly and efficient, Cubus was terribly tidy and efficient. He disliked disorder. Quislo the fifth loved measuring space in his own special spacecraft. His best friend was Hexador, the sixth polygon. So that's basically the number 5. So I guess all these numbers are supposed to equate. Oh, Hexador, that's like the idea of 6 is the number of hex, you know. That's interesting. Hexador was always inventing something. He liked to try to look into the future. Seventh of the inhabitants was Septo, but that's Hexador. So he's like casting, like a wizard, an alchemist or something. And 6, that's sort of the, I don't know. There's Septo, number 7. He's like the doctor. Look at he's a tree doctor there. Look. Absent-minded Septo loved plants, and was recognized by all the others as their doctor. The 8th polygon was called Octave. For some reason, 8 is clumsy. I'm trying to think of the association between 8 and being clumsy, but Octave was clumsy but willing, the largest polygon, and also the silliest. Last came gentle Novim. And there's Novim. And you know that song, Novim's Nightmare, is such a good song, and I did a little instrumental of it. Just it wasn't really that. I mean, just I kind of took the gist of the melody, but it's a really one of those little Cat Stevens acoustic melodies that sort of timeless. Novim was silent and old. He spent much of his time reading and thinking about everything deeply. And if you think about it, at the beginning of the album, you have Whistle Star, but then you have Novim's Nightmare. And so the story is sort of Novim having this nightmare of, why was I born the 9, cursed repeatedly. But then it sounds like liberation. All his life he's been studying, and liberation is going to come in the form of this Jezero coming. And you start to have these magic of magic, and it sounds like Monad saying, like, what kind of magic, what kind of power. And so as Jezero comes, it's fuzzy, but Jezero sort of shows up. I guess Whistle Star would be Jezero sort of showing up to the planet. Then Novim kind of has a premonition, and, then you have magic of magic and Drywood, which is where, like Drywood takes the fire. That's like the freedom that Jezero represents, sort of tearing through the planet. But Novim's Nightmare is kind of a premonition of the change. But then he also, towards the end, he says he started to feel the freedom and the liberation. But there's Novim. He might be my favorite. He's an older, kind of scholarly number. Novim was silent and old. He spent much of his time reading and thinking about everything deeply. The 9 polygons followed a life of routine that has existed for as long as anyone could remember. They did not seem to age, nor did they seem to change. It was therefore all the more shocking when an ordinary day things first started to go wrong. So, and then you have the track listings. Like I said, you start with Whistle Star, and I'm going to just sort of imagine that that's Jezero coming to the planet. Then Novim, he's the most sensitive and learned, and he sort of senses it. Once I had a dream that worried me, but here he's like feeling the freedom of Jezero. He's like one of the first people to sense it. All at once my bones began to change. I was tall and young again, sweet as rain falling on the snow. So this whistle, Jezero shows up, and then you have Magic of Magics, where it sounds like Monad. We'll say this is Magic or somebody. The power of Jezero, which is inexplicable. What kind of power, what kind of demon is this who kicks me out in shame with every word he says? So, like this unlikely power source as 0 is upending the planet. Kind of a revolution, really. Drywood that's racing through. And then Banapple Gas. I guess, I don't know, Jezero is running around dispensing Banapple Gas, which is a great song, actually. Very cleverly written song. Got a couple key changes in it. Kind of reminds me of Mrs. Robinson with that key change. So, it's a Cheech and Chong type song, I would say. Don't want to put word, Then The Land of Free Love and Goodbye. So it sounds like the traditional morals are going out the window, at least temporarily. There's Jezero. That's the song Jazero. Like I said, it's kind of fuzzy because you might have said, well, Jazero should maybe be over at the front, but they stuck it over here. But Jazero's a really nice little tune, by the way. And I remember, I'm old enough to remember, Jazero and Pineapple Gas, I would say, were the two songs you heard on the radio. But I also remember hearing Drywood. I mean, they because this still kind of came out in album-oriented rock, but right at the end, but right before album-oriented rock became formula rock. So, Home, beautiful song. Home on a kite we fly, home on a breeze we blow, eyeing the folks below, watching everybody run, each one heading for a different place, watching everybody bide, each behind a different face. So great. And then Monad's Anthem. And at the end, that's just a majestic imperial, it sounds like the emperor, the great. And this is the tribute to one. Look at this. One is the ever blazing star, sword of the immortal world, and highest light. Yes, this is so one is the highest number. And that at the end, that it's interesting, that's the end of it. So there's this unrest, but at the end that we seem that some kind of balance has been restored, and one is the highest number. One is, I guess you could say that's religious, but also, everything is unified. It's unity. Our star is ever rising, born of the eternal lamp and holy fire. Mighty burning mountains, the everlasting love of one is one and one is one and one is one. Is one is the ever-kindling star, king of the immortal spark in heaven's eye. Yes, this is our star. Yes, this is our star, our star, our star. So it's just a great album. And I just kind of wanted to walk you through that. I didn't want to go on too long. It ends with the 0, not a 1, on the back of the album book. There's some of the... But a really interesting album. And like I say, I guess my final assessment would be it was kind of it was a grandiose concept, maybe the grandiosity of a young man that was very creative and thought of all kinds of great ideas, and probably, if nothing else, cost a lot of money, and maybe there was also some concerns about the marketing of it. But if you aim for nothing, you hit it every time. What he did get out of this is a really interesting album. I don't think it did all that well, but all these years later, we can celebrate, I think, one of the most interesting albums, if sort of truncated by the fact that what it was he never really was able to bring it out. I mean, you could say a lot of things. It could have been a double album. It could have been a movie. It could have been a bigger book to go with it, explain the story, because I think a lot of people missed the story. But it's just a terrific album. And I encourage you to listen to it because I don't think it's one of his more popular albums. Thanks. God bless.